All right, and welcome to Hat-Trick Sports Talk. We're recording this around noon Pacific time. I am joined, as always, by Brandon and Shane. Hello, guys. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, good.
Pretty
All right,
good.
all right.
Pretty good. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Let's
You seem very excited.
Yes.
let's get through the NBA restart. Of course, we're finally after waiting for I don't know how many months, 4 or 5, we're finally getting ready for the playoffs. We begin with the 8 seed play-in, the Blazers and the Grizzlies. Game 1 is tomorrow on ABC, and then Game 2 is Sunday if necessary. Of course, the Grizzlies have to win back-to-back, both Game 1 and Game 2, to get the 8 seed. Did you just change into a Raptors hat, Brandon, for this segment?
I did, indeed. I had it all planned out and everything.
For this segment, you decided to change to a Raptors hat.
Because, so you see, we're not talking about, as much as I would love to talk about the Seahawks, but
which we'll get to today, by the way.
About basketball today.
We will get to some interesting Seahawks news a bit later in the show. Brandon, I'll start with you. We were watching a bit of that Blazers Nets game yesterday. What was your impression on the Blazers so far, not only in that game, but in the bubble throughout?
So the Blazers are an interesting team because you could argue that the Blazers So the Blazers throughout the season, everybody knew they were good. Like, they didn't lose a bunch of players coming off of last year's, like, arguably kind of ridiculous run in the playoffs.
They didn't have Nurkic. They didn't have Collins. Right. Now they get him back, yeah.
They had a fairly implausible run in the playoffs last year. I mean, they knocked off OKC. They knocked off Houston, I believe. No, not Houston. Houston went on to play Golden State.
But, either way.
But basically, they lost to Golden State. But point being, they come back this year and they had a pretty good season.
Mm-hmm.
However, one of the things that they had to deal with is a lot of their main players kept getting hurt throughout the season, so they didn't really play as a whole team solidified. I believe this is one of the only games that they've played with like everybody on the floor available.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed that when they have a full squad that can play together, it makes them so much more dangerous, and they can afford to have a quote-unquote worse-off game from Dame Lillard, who
really worse off.
Didn't
he scored
have
42.
60 points. Oh, no, he only had 42 points in a game, which is insane. I mean, I believe I saw somewhere that he's like one of the only people to have in 1 month have like 60, 40, 30, 60 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like basically watching the game, some people might have thought, oh wow, the Blazers looked a little bit worse for wear, but I would remind people that the Blazers only won most of their games down the stretch by like 3 points, 4 points, 2 points, 1 point, 2 points. So they're not exactly like going to destroy a team. And I will say this, one thing that I very much agree with, I agree with Charles Barkley on Inside the NBA. He made a very good point that they need to play defense.
Yeah.
That team doesn't play defense at all.
No.
Like they're up there because they can shoot the ball and score the ball at will. Like anybody on that team can score. But if they're not going to play defense, even against even though we keep making the point that the Lakers like only have 2 guys who really bring the big scoring. In AD and LeBron. The Lakers are still good. They still have lots of good talent, and they're still going to find a way to win. Even though you have to ask the question, how good are the Lakers on defense themselves?
Right. And I think it brings up an interesting point, too, because the Lakers, I believe they played Denver earlier in the week, and they finally started to look like themselves, but defensively it was still pretty terrible. One of the pieces that is interesting that I know some people have mentioned with Portland is Hassan Whiteside.
Yeah.
And I know that that's really random, but him off the bench makes so much more sense for them. Because, he's just a rebounding machine anyway. But how much does a rebounding machine, guys like Andre Drummond, Hassan Whiteside, those two are pretty much the big two right now in the league. How much does that really help you in your starting lineup? But in your bench in a limited role, he can actually be really helpful. And with Nurkic and Collins, that tandem with those three have definitely helped them, I think, as a whole. Shane, what's been your perspective on Portland throughout this 8-game seeding schedule?
I've been shocked to say the least. I mean, going into the bubble, they obviously weren't. They weren't. I mean, I thought they could have a chance at the 8 seed, but they weren't exactly on my radar because we're all thinking about Memphis, of course, who was in the 8 seed, and then New Orleans because I got Zion, so that's a big thing that everyone's looking at. But then here's Portland, being sneaky and doing their thing, and I mean offensively they're just insane. I mean Damian Lillard is probably the best 3-point shooter in the bubble right now.
Yeah.
And like Brennan said, defensively they haven't looked great, which doesn't work in their favor. Because it's great if you can score, but you got to be able to back it up too, and stop other teams like LA Lakers who have good scorers as well. So I think if those two played in the first round, it would be very high octane, high scoring series without a doubt. I mean the Lakers they have their own issues. They have some injury concerns. LeBron didn't exactly look like himself a couple of games ago against, I think it was Denver. So it's and obviously not having guys like Rondo and
Avery Bradley, who opted out as well.
Yeah. But they still have, I think obviously this is the age of the duos in the NBA. You got LeBron, AD, which, they're still there. They'll still be good. So, that's what is important. Just to at least have, your strong core for a series like that against a team like Portland. But then, you get later on in the playoffs and then, I don't know, that gets a bit more questionable, but we'll talk about that later.
Yep. And then I'll continue with you, Shane, as well with Memphis. Memphis, to me, as a whole, have not really been that interesting in the bubble so far. I don't know how competitive they'll actually be, especially with losing a big piece in Jaren Jackson Jr. Do you think Ja Morant can do enough against Portland and this high-octane offense that they have?
I don't think so. I think Memphis is still just too young. They were in kind of I think the reason that they were in the 8 seed to begin with is because Portland was having issues before the season delay, and New Orleans didn't have Zion, and then you didn't have a team like Phoenix that was red hot, you know what I mean? And so because of that, I almost felt like they were just kind of in that 8 seed by default in a way, if that makes sense. And so no, I don't think I don't think Ja Morant has the the experience and the kind of the playing ability yet to just go in and take on Damian Lillard, who, in my opinion, is probably the second or third best point guard in the NBA. And, he's up there. And, I just, I don't think this is their year. But, I definitely think that they're on a good track for the future. So, I don't look down on them if they don't get it done.
Mm-hmm. And then Brandon, do you feel the same way with Memphis? What's your perspective on them so far?
I agree with Shane.
Oh, that's
Memphis,
good.
Memphis went something like 2-6 in the bubble, I think. Which makes me question, I think it's kind of BS that they're even in the play-in game. I mean, frankly, I think if you're going to consider the bubble to be a restart to the season, I would say that Memphis has no place being in the play-in game, because you could make the argument that if this was a regular season, Memphis would not have been able to hold on to the 8th seed. Look, you can make an argument that yes, the Suns should be a play-in game between the Suns and Portland, but that's for another day. But I would say I don't think the Grizzlies are going to win one game. I don't think so. I think if anything, the Grizzlies can walk away from all 4 teams in all 4 teams who were in the running for the 8th or 9th seed can walk away from the bubble happy on some level. The Spurs, Popovich should be thrilled with how his young team looked.
Look at how DeMar DeRozan played, by the way, in this bubble. My God.
You can make the argument that okay, they didn't make it into the play-in game, but they're a young team. They played pretty well, and they just came up short. The Suns, my God, this is the best Suns team I've seen
since the Stoudemire era, bro.
In a decade, literally a decade. And the biggest thing about the Suns team is that they were actually taking accountability as a team, whether they won or whether they lost. They played as a team, they won as a team. Portland, of course, continued to show that they're going to be in the running for the next couple of years. I think the one big thing that I think Portland needs to think about, though, is they have a couple spots that are held by veterans, by people who are getting older, that honestly I think they could run into the same problem that a lot of basketball teams have. They could run into the problems that the Celtics had in the early 2010s, when they had those great teams that were amazing, but they were very much veteran run, and they ended up falling off for a long time. And then of course you come back to Memphis, and I think out of the 4 of them, Memphis is the one that's going to have the most rebuilding to do, but they have some key good pieces there. But honestly, out of all 4 teams, if I'm Memphis, I'm the team that going what the hell happened? How did we come into the bubble with a 3-game lead and lose it?
I think it's very simple, right? If you're talking about Memphis, you're talking about missing Jaren Jackson Jr. He's just such a big part of what they do. And now you look at Memphis and you say, this is a future team now. Yeah. They're just filled with so much young talent, and it's just they're going to be so good next year in a stacked Western Conference. The Western Conference is only going to get better as we go along throughout the next 4 or 5 years, and Memphis is certainly going to be in that mix. And then, Shane, let's kind of finish this conversation with the Spurs, actually. 22 straight years making the playoffs. They obviously didn't make the playoffs this year, but 22 straight years, if I'm correct, of making the playoffs. Talk about
Has it really been?
Yep.
Yeah.
Talk about that run, and just, with all these guys like Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, even Kawhi Leonard towards the tail end of that era. Talk about what Pop has made and that culture to constantly make the playoffs and be one of those legendary teams, not only in the NBA, but all of sports.
Yeah. They just, I think it was one of those teams, especially when when did they win the title?
2014.
5, 6 years? Yeah.
Yeah, 2014.
Yeah. And, you just look at that team, and because, we talk about teams that are good now and they have a lot of good duos, but they had Parker, they had Ginobili, Tim Duncan.
And let's not even talk about Duncan and Robinson or whatever back in those days too. And in the early days.
They had, this team was absolutely loaded. I'm honestly surprised that they didn't win more titles, but I guess that's what happens when you get a team like Golden State coming in. But
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, it's incredible that, especially in this day and age, to get a team with that many star players and to just be so consistent for so long and be that dominant. I mean, honestly, I think it'll be a while until we see something like that again in the NBA. I mean, more than anything, I'm just surprised they didn't win more titles, like I already said. But it is insane nonetheless that 22, that's a long time to be consistently in the playoffs. Wow.
Talk about the culture that Pop has built there, because I think that's probably one of the biggest things that got him consistently in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, it's to me, I think the impressive thing about the Spurs is like they've managed to be a team that like is so successful, but yet they still somehow like fly under the radar. Like they've been successful, but they've never like reached the like at times in our lifetime they've been that top tier like team. Like if you remember in like the early 2000s, it's like their names were always like up there. It's like the Spurs were like where the Golden State Warriors, the Cleveland Cavaliers were. But then like even when they won their championships, like the years that they've won their championships, it's never seemed like they were like the out and out like dominant teams. They just like they were a team that would go to work, they would do their job, they would win the game, they would leave, and everybody would be like, wow, that just happened. I think that would define the sort of like culture of the Spurs. They're like a hardworking team that's not super flashy, and they get it done. They have good players, and yeah, I mean, and like I would also say that Coach Popovich is like one of those coaches that like is rare in the NBA because he's more like an NFL coach to me in that he like doesn't do a lot of the like rah like you know how NBA coaches can be where they're like yelling on the sideline, yelling at the coaches, like like making a big stink. But like you see, like Popovich sometimes, like if it's necessary, like if he legitimately gets angry, but like most of the time it seems like he's one of those guys who like is very calm and collected. He's like doesn't want anybody to see. He's very cerebral, like and I think that kind of goes along with the type of players he wants on his teams.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, just to finish off, I mean, with the Spurs, like, and what Pop has done there, that's one of the biggest things. It's just how quiet the organization is, how under the radar it is, and it's just, and I think over the next 10, 20 years, the dynasty won't be remembered as, I don't know, maybe fondly is not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's just like you look at the Patriots dynasty and there's always going to be these things of like, oh, they cheated, all this garbage, and they were loud and all this stuff. And then the Spurs, it's like, no, they were just there. And we didn't appreciate it enough. And that's just so rare for a dynasty.
Yeah, I think unfortunately when we're like 40 or 50 and people are looking back at this time period of basketball, like the 2000s, 2010s, they're gonna think about when they think about the teams that were the powerhouses. They'll think about the Warriors and the Lakers and the Cavs
and the Heat
and then I feel like the
Celtics as well.
The Celtics. The Spurs will be kind of an afterthought, Like I just, which is unfortunate because I mean they had so many players who will end up in the Hall of Fame. Like they had. I mean, you've listed them all off already.
Yeah,
it's insane. And then you also think about the amount of players who have gone on to other teams to like be key components of those teams. I mean, like
Kawhi is a perfect example.
I mean,
Danny Green.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's wild. And to talk about where they're headed now, I mean, even with DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, their contracts are going to be up in a few seasons, and they're still building young talent. And then to see Pop being so progressive to bring in a coach like Becky Hammond, who's did an amazing job not only in summer league but in the exhibition games. She was the head coach, and she's done an amazing job. She should get a coaching job, I would bet you, in the next 3-4 years as a head coach. The culture, the progressive culture that he's built there as well, has been absolutely incredible. And then let's move on to some of these playoff matchups. Is this basically one of those playoffs where you finally realize, I mean, we've always realized this, but realize that the East is garbage?
Well, the East is pretty garbo to begin with.
I mean, let's start with the East. How many of these matchups are you actually interested in?
Well, I mean, for me, I'm gonna watch. The only matchup I'm really that interested in is the Raptors, because they're my team.
But you're playing the Nets.
And we're playing the Nets. I mean, look, I learned my lesson against Orlando last year. You can't write a team off, but it's the Nets. So unless Toronto, unless half of our team, gets hurt, I'm not gonna be that worried. Look, I think we've already established that a lot of these, for me, the two series that I'll pay attention to are Boston, Philly, because I think Philly still has a little bit of a spark in them, and they have a possibility of doing something, and Miami versus the Pacers. Now, here's why. If you remember, the Pacers, the last time Miami played the Pacers in the regular season. Well,
not the last time, but before the hiatus.
Before the hiatus in the regular season, Miami and the Pacers had a tussle.
T.J. Warren and Jimmy
Butler. And there's some beef still there.
Yeah, no question.
So look, I get down with beef in the NBA. You give me people who hate each other, I will watch that game.
And then Shane, let's talk about Philly in particular as well. Let's say Joel Embiid is healthy, and he should be throughout this whole series. Are you more confident in Philly if it's just Embiid and no Simmons, as this is going to be with Simmons being out for the year?
I almost am in a weird way, because, I mean, Ben Simmons is great, obviously, but when they're good players on their own, but when they're together, something just doesn't add up. It's, it's pretty well known that they don't exactly get along. But it's, I do think that they probably have a better chance with just Embiid. I still don't really like their chance. I mean, honestly, I think Boston will win the series in 4. There, I said it. But I just don't. I think there's too much. There's too much dysfunction in that organization, and I think they need a serious culture change. And I mean, I don't know how exactly you do that.
Get rid of Brett Brown. It's that simple. Get Brett Brown out of here, because he should have been out last year. And I'm not a big fan. I'm just saying fire the coach. But Brett Brown and the culture he's built there, it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, guys like Jimmy Butler have been very vocal about it on JJ Redick's podcast before the season. He was very vocal about how dysfunction it was, and so was JJ as well. I mean, it's just Brett Brown. I think if they lose this series, as you say, in 4, I think it probably might be 5 or 6. But if they lose it in 4, Brett Brown's done.
I don't see it being 4, and the reason being is I've watched. I think I watched some of a little.
5.
I've seen a little bit of Philly's last 3 games.
Mm-hmm.
And they are a team that has a lot of players that people don't give credit for skills. And I mean, yes, Boston's a very good team. But if you, how do I put it? if I feel like there are certain things Boston does really well, and there's certain things they don't do well. They score well. They play pretty good defense. But if you shake up a team, if you get them rattled from the beginning, that's going to have a tough time. So I think the one thing Philly's going to have to do is they're going to have to come out with their big guns and be like, hey, you got to hit those threes. You got to get the Celtics going. What the hell is happening here? Because I believe that's one of the things that happened with against the Raptors in that Raptors-Celtics game. The Celtics came out and they just
blazing.
wham. They didn't let because like the thing is with the Raptors, they keep games very close usually, which allows them to like win it in the end. They brought the score back to be a pretty respectable score, but it wasn't close enough to win it in the end.
I think the perfect example for that game would be Portland. Portland against Boston early on. They were up by 20 in the third and actually kind of crumbled a little bit. You can get them a bit off their game pretty much at any time. I don't know if Boston has the skill set just because Philly has the skill set just because there's not a lot of natural three-point shooters on this team just as a whole. And that's why they brought in a guy like Alec Burks in the trade deadline way back in February.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get that much playing time, but yeah. And let's go to the West where pretty much all these matchups, let's just say Portland wins. What is your guys' perspective on this matchup? Shane, I'll start with you. The Lakers and let's say Portland does win here.
Wait, so we're saying if Portland wins that first round series?
If Portland is the play-in winner.
If Portland is the
Lakers, Portland.
What's your thoughts on this series?
I mean, I already kind of said a little earlier, it's definitely going to, in my opinion, it'll be a very high scoring, very offensive heavy series because, I mean, that's what they do well at. And neither of these teams, at least in the bubble, have been very good defensively. Not that they can't be good, but they just haven't really put in the effort, it seems like. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, as good as Portland has been and as rocky as the Lakers have been, I do think that LA will come out on top in probably 6 or 7, just because they have, they obviously have the edge when it comes to LeBron with playoffs. He's very clutch, obviously, in that sense. And so, I will say them, but I do think this is a better matchup than people will think, Yeah.
Brandon, do you feel the same way about this matchup? Do you think there's a chance this goes 6 or 7?
I do believe it goes 6 or 7. However, I have the opposite opinion of Shane. I think it's going to be Portland in 7. I think every game is going to be super close. I think at the end of the day, if this was a regular NBA playoff game with home court advantage, full teams, everybody on your team playing, like stacked squads, one-on-one, no excuses, Lakers take it, easy. However, Lakers, man, this is a team that I've said from the beginning of the year. I never bought into the hype. There was something that felt weird about the Lakers to me this year. It felt forced. It felt very much like a win now with superstars team. I just don't see a duo getting it done. I don't. I don't see AD and LeBron being able to carry the team to a win.
I look at this matchup, and if it is Memphis, the Lakers are going to have an easy time.
Oh yeah,
It's that simple.
If it's Memphis, it's Lakers in 4. Like,
Yeah, I probably would
duh.
still say 5, but either way, I feel like with this matchup, like I look back to that Denver game and go, there's something here, you know, but they haven't shown. There's only one game. That was the only game that mattered in this bubble that the Lakers played well in.
Yeah.
That was it.
Well, the
So-
Clippers game, they played pretty well.
Right, other than the Clippers game. But other than those two, yikes.
Yeah.
So I don't even know what to make of the Lakers. I said the Lakers win in 7 at that point, but I don't know. At this point, I don't know. Let's see these first couple games against Portland, and I think it will give us a better sense of where the Lakers' mindset is moving forward.
And for me, just one last thing, Robert. For me, I think the reason I'm going with Portland, the thing that really solidified it for me is I just feel like Portland has this level of like want it, need it, like that feeling of like we have to. Like there's no, and honestly, I feel like Damian Lillard is on this like quest this year to finally shut everyone up and be like, I am a superstar. And you can't say anything about it. And I think when you have a player like that who's like so red hot, it's really hard to get past that.
Yeah. And then with the Clippers and the Mavs, I think we have a solid understanding on the Mavericks with Luka and Kristaps. Kristaps has definitely played a lot better in the bubble, but Luka is just being Luka, and of course we've mentioned it constantly. As with the Clippers, though, there's a couple pieces of this puzzle missing still with the Clippers. Obviously, Montrezl Harrell went to the bubble on Monday. He should be available at least by game 2 of this series, if not game 1, but I imagine it'll be game 2. Harrell's going to be back. That team is going to be fully healthy. Pat Bev should be playing on Monday. Everyone should be fully healthy, but let's be completely honest. We have not seen this Clippers team fully healthy.
Yeah.
Do you even know what to expect with them at this moment?
Yeah. You also have to think about the fact that it's hard. Like, I played a lot of pickup basketball, and I know this is not comparable to, like, the NBA, but any sport that you pick up again after months of not playing, you can't just jump back into something and expect yourself to be at, like, full game speed fitness. Like, there's a difference between being fit and being game speed fit.
Especially when you're playing the best players in the world.
Right, exactly. I don't see Montrezl Harrell and Pat Bev jumping in the first or second game and be like, yeah, let's drop like 30 points and get 15 assists and like a bunch of rebounds and be like a big player of the game. Like, or I don't see it. Maybe the second series, I could see if they could get past the Mavs, I could see the Clippers being dominant. But if the Clippers, here's my thing with the Clippers. Would not be surprised if they get taken out. Just saying it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Because here's the deal with the Clippers. It's been this case all year, and I even said it. Like, I expected in the bubble, I was like, they're not going to play their guys. They don't care. They're just waiting for the playoffs. But they've been like that all year. There was maybe two stretches of 2 weeks. Maybe I think it might have been in January and maybe a little bit in December where that team was fully healthy and we felt like, okay, there's something here. But I can't make an opinion on the Clippers right now because I don't even know what they are. And we're in the playoffs and I don't even know what they are.
So this brings us to the question of, hypothetically, what happens to the NBA if both the Lakers and the Clippers get taken out in the first round?
Like Houston. You look at Houston and maybe Denver.
Well, the NBA higher-ups are going to have a freaking aneurysm. That you would have the Clippers gone, the Lakers gone, New Orleans didn't even make it in.
Yeah.
You have to imagine from that point, it's either, to me, my mind, you know who wins the chip in my mind? Either Boston, Milwaukee, or Raptors. That to me, there is no one in the West who could compete with
I look
Boston, Milwaukee, or Celtic or Toronto,
we'll
other
get to
than Clippers. Or
we'll get
I
to
don't see
Houston
it.
in a bit.
I don't see it.
I think Houston, but Shane, what's your perspective on the Clippers? Do you kind of feel how I feel, where you just kind of don't know, even though you've watched them a good portion of the year, you just don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's they have. I mean, they have so many good players. Obviously, tons of depth, but like you said, we've never really seen them all together. I mean, we have a little bit, but it's been a long, long time. I mean, they're, um, I mean, at this point with the long break and everything, it's like the stuff that happened, before March, it doesn't really matter at this point in a way, because you have all this time off. Like Brandon said, you're not going to be playing exactly like you were back then. So, yeah, I mean, I have a hard time, seeing it all just instantly mesh like that. Um, and I don't know why they haven't been taking advantage of these 8 games to get these guys playing time and get them going, because, Dallas, I mean, that's not an easy matchup. They're not, granted, Dallas hasn't been the most amazing team in the bubble, but, still, they're not a bad team by any means. So, yeah, I mean, I think Dallas will probably come out strong, win the first game or two, and then after that, I think maybe LA kind of starts to figure it out a little bit, and then I think this series will also go to 7. I'm going to say the Clippers will win, but like Brandon, I wouldn't be surprised if Dallas won. So
let's move on to Denver and Utah. Denver has been one of the most impressive teams in the bubble so far, and they're not even fully healthy. Like, Gary Harris hasn't played yet, and they've been so impressive. They're young talent, guys like Bull, guys like Michael Porter Jr. And something that many people have pointed out is that Michael Malone doesn't even know what his rotations are going to look like in the playoffs, because the team's not even healthy yet. And when you get guys like Harris back, how does that lower the minutes of guys like Bull or Michael Porter Jr., excuse me? And then with Utah, like, other than Rudy Gobert, I don't like Donovan Mitchell. I'm good with, but Rudy Gobert, I'm not. He just hasn't impressed me much at all. Shane, what's your perspective on this series?
yeah, this is an interesting series to me, because I feel like these are two teams that are very similar in a lot of ways in terms of just having younger talent that's good and consistent, but hasn't quite broken through and wowed us all.
And that would be Denver more specifically.
Yeah, and I mean, Denver's obviously got Bull, Michael Porter, but then I think someone else that you have to look at is Jamal Murray, because he's been one of the leading scorers in the bubble, and so I mean, this will be an interesting series. Denver, I think their offense really needs to be very consistent for them to make it down the stretch. And yeah, I do think Denver will win this series, because I look at Utah, and Utah's a strange team, like you said, because they got Gobert and Mitchell, and I honestly, I don't know. They're both good, but it feels like they're just there's this level that they need to be in order to be really competitive against these great teams, and they're just not quite there. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, I think this team, I think they need some more time before they really are a big household name, the next couple of years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting a better sense of what they are going to do, like a guard. So yeah, I think Denver will probably get it in 5 or 6, just because of their better consistency. But yeah, I mean, it'll be a good series, I think.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, what's your perspective on this series?
Yeah, I think Denver just has. I think they have more to bring to the table offensively. And I'm not impressed by the Jazz. I don't have any. I just feel like Denver will win. I don't have much to say about either team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's going to be weird how the rotation looks for Denver. The fact that they have to deal with that is going to be interesting. And then with OKC and Houston, this is probably one of my favorite matchups of the whole thing because I like what OKC has with that 3-guard set. But, of course, the most intriguing part is the CP3 revenge series, him playing Houston again and all that. And then, of course, we've been extremely impressed with Houston so far in the bubble. Brandon, I'll start with you with this matchup.
I was super excited for this matchup at first, and then I found out that
Oh, Westbrook. That's right.
Westbrook's out for a couple games with an injury.
Does that really matter with how Harden plays, though?
Well, yeah, because Harden plays well, but like when he has someone to play off of, I think it just works better because he doesn't have to have that image in his head, that thought in his head of having to like do it all himself. But I think at the end of the day, I think the Rockets will win. I just think the Thunder, they've lost so many of their major pieces through trades or whatnot. I just don't see them winning it.
Mm-hmm. Shane, what's been your perspective on OKC so far in the bubble?
I think they, yeah, I mean, they're certainly not the team that they were for several years back there, but they're still competitive. I don't. I mean, I don't see them. Like Brandon said, I just don't think they have enough. I mean, Chris Paul obviously is great, but I mean, the team as a whole, I think there's just something missing. I can't quite put my finger on it. But it's going to, in my opinion, result in them not really performing super well in, a playoff against a team like Houston, who has been red hot. I mean, yeah, losing Westbrook is not ideal, but like you said, James Harden, I mean, he's just been so good anyways that I think they will be okay for the first couple of games. But then, yeah, when you get him back, I mean, those two are just an offensive machine. There's no denying that. I mean, honestly, with the way that Houston has been playing in the bubble, I think they have a good shot at winning the West, to be honest with you.
I'm starting to feel like that too.
I know I'm thinking ahead here, and I never thought that I would say that about Houston, but yeah, because I mean, you look at the LA teams that we all thought were going to be, the for sure winners, and now well, I mean, now they are in an interesting place to say the least. So, yeah, I mean, it's all just weird because of the 4 months off, but got to be adaptable and take things as they are now.
Speaking of being adaptable, we got an interesting look at that moving to the NFL with Hard Knocks LA Episode 1 and sort of their preparation and with the unique circumstances of the pandemic. Brandon, I'll start with you. Before we get to some of these things that I wrote down, I'll start with you, Brandon, first. What was your thoughts on the first episode of Hard Knocks?
It was a little bit slower than the normal first episode, which is to be expected. It was pretty interesting, I thought, seeing like the way that they were handling things. I'm usually not a huge fan of Sean McVay, but to be honest, I gotta give him a little bit of respect for the way that he's handling the pandemic. I actually thought I always got the sense that he would be someone who'd be, I don't know, I always got the sense that he wouldn't be someone who would take something like this seriously, but just seeing the way that they were able to create an entire workout area and an entire staging area so that they wouldn't have to go inside is actually kind of genius.
And especially in LA where it's sunny virtually all the time.
If you think about it, because that cuts down on the chances of getting sick since they're outdoors. So that was interesting. But then also I found it interesting that you were seeing that the kryptonite of NFL players is a Q-tip.
Yeah.
Like, just these big, strong NFL players squirming because they had to have a cotton swab. Not even
up their nose.
Not even all the way up their nose, like the long one, like they used to do at the beginning of the COVID. Now it's just swirling around the fat part of the nose.
From 4 to 10 seconds, yeah.
It's like, bruh. I'm sure there's people out there who've had like the long ones done where it like literally used to go all the way to the brain.
I've seen them. Yeah, I've seen people.
That would be, but yeah, so that was interesting. What else did I find interesting? Oh, a funny moment for me was Sean McVay when he found out about face guards. Instead of wearing a mask, he like comes out with a freaking face guard on. I'm like, oh my god.
I'm like, that is so Sean McVay.
It is very Sean McVay. And then there was also the revelation that the head coach of the Chargers had
Anthony Lynn.
Anthony Lynn had COVID.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, for me, the best moment was it was kind of a moment for me where I went, we might actually get football in this year. And it was just seeing the way that teams are taking this shit seriously and doing what needs to be done. And as Anthony Lynn said, we're going to make sure you guys stay safe. So then when you go out on the field, you could do what you do best and hit guys hard and play football hard. And I think at the end of the day, I think that, and I said at the beginning, a month ago, I had a prediction that I believe like this is what's going to happen. Like because of the culture of football where and I think it also is a good thing in a way because I think it's highlighting that football, yes, it has this like this idea around it that people just are it's like a bunch of meathead football players, but at the end of the day, football is a sport where you go out on the field and you play hard and you hit hard and you kind of put away any like compassion when you're on the field because let's be honest, we all know what football is. It's a hard-hitting sport. It's a brutal sport. But when you're off the field, you care. A lot of these players care about each other in the league, and so I think every one of these players understands what needs to be done, and I'm hoping, and from what I'm hearing, it seems like we might actually get a season. So
yep. Shane, what was your thoughts on episode 1?
Yeah, a lot of the same there. I think, I think uncertainty is kind of the the theme in everyone's lives when it comes to just the NFL season, whether or not it's actually going to happen. And, like Brennan said, I think this episode, more than anything, it gives us, hope that they are actually taking this seriously, which, I mean, that's very clear. And, everyone is being very adaptable, or at least these two teams are. But I imagine it's like this for most of the league. And, they do seem to be taking it very seriously and doing things virtually if they can, like with their whole, team meetings on Zoom. And, none of them, none of these guys know what to expect with, at this rate, it seems like we're obviously, going to be in this pandemic for now.
At least for the season, for a
right.
good portion of it.
And
right.
Maybe it'll go away. Maybe it'll downgrade a bit so that things can change. But
right. But they're saying, we're gonna be fine. We're gonna make our way through it. They have great safety protocols. They're getting tested every day. Following good hand hygiene, wearing masks or face guards, whatever. And, even a lot of teams are doing kind of like their own mini bubbles, like that Seahawks, that rookie corner from the Seahawks. He had someone in his hotel room that he wasn't supposed to have there, and they just straight up cut him.
Yeah.
So, they're taking this really seriously. And I think players know that, and they are doing so as well. Ezekiel Elliott, sorry. Like Brandon said, it was a little slower, but I think that was kind of by intention in a way, just to show that, this has been kind of a slow burn, obviously, the whole season leading up to this, but we got good stuff coming up, I think, with the season. So, yeah.
A couple of things, of course, you guys mentioned the testing, the preparation, the Zoom. The 3 other things I wrote down here first, walkthroughs. Shane, you might give us a little bit more of a perspective. I don't know how much at our former high school you guys do walkthroughs, but what is that like in particular, and especially with them doing walkthroughs the first week of camp and not putting pads until the 3rd week of camp? What do you think that is like from a coaching perspective, or even from a player's perspective as well?
Regardless of whatever's happening, I think that's I think every team should do that. It is
protocol. Yeah.
Right. When I played, that was what we did the first, I think it was, the first 2 weeks of practice. Coach said, we're just going to wear, just helmets, just because, we do some running. And so just in case we, run into each other or something, an accident, don't want to have a head injury. But yeah, then you just wear shorts and a t-shirt, and we just, have the playbook, and we, walk through it, or, jog, run, whatever. And we just kind of get used to holding the ball. And it's good because, when you're doing all that stuff, when you're just trying to condition and you're learning all these plays and how to practically use them on the field, you don't want to be in full pads, because it's not necessary to get all that physical contact when you are still learning. It's dangerous for starters. But then, once you, by about week 3, once you have a better grasp on everything, then that's when you can say, okay, let's actually start, going like half speed with pads and you don't actually tackle in practice. You just kind of wrap up and that's that, because you don't want to get hurt, obviously. But I think this is definitely a good thing for the start. And I mean, for NFL guys, honestly, I think they could just practice without pads all throughout the year. I mean, they know how to tackle. I don't think they really need to, because their bodies are so, when you're older, your body gets so much more beat up after a game, they don't want to go out there and run around and tackle each other during the week. But yeah, anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was so strange for me. And I think it was part of what made the episode a little bit slow, was just to see them just do walkthroughs and do it the whole day. Because sometimes you just do walkthroughs in the morning, in the afternoon, you'll go into pads. That's something that's very commonplace in training camp. And we're not going to have that this year. And them being in pads is going to be a much different thing in terms of protocol and how that's going to all work. So it's going to be very interesting. We spoke about the Zoom thing. Contracts. Two big contract stories in this. One, Joey Bosa's contract. They show Justin Herbert signing his contract. Pretty standard stuff other than them wearing a mask in the picture, which is pretty funny to see either your first contract or your biggest contract being the one where you wear a mask. But I know we're in the media, and I know in the media we have this whole thing about we want to get an answer out of the guy. We want to get
I was about to ask. I was about to bring this up.
Hang on. So I understand that, but I got to be honest. Yeah, it did get a rise out of Jalen Ramsey that they asked him about his contract, and they re-asked him over and over. And that might have not been the best way to perceive it, but I loved it.
I have to say I was on Jalen Ramsey's side in that situation. Yep. I think it was totally inappropriate. And that is something that pisses me off as someone who is in the media and wants to go into the media. It pisses me off when I used to watch like media scrums, and you would have people asking the same question over and over and over again. And I think it was the correct answer of Jalen Ramsey. And honestly, if I was Jalen Ramsey, I'd be like, nah, I'm out of here. I ain't going back there. And honestly, I have a lot of respect for him for standing his ground and telling them, look, like, this is the answer. This is the honest to God answer. And that's it. So,
and he knows, and I mean, this is same thing with Jamal Adams and his contract negotiation with the Seahawks in particular. They're playing on their fifth-year options this year.
Yeah.
And they're doing it because it's better for the team in terms of cap. It just makes the team better to do that. And it was exactly. I had no problem with the answer, because in the media, it's like, oh, it's a prototypical answer. What do you actually mean? No, that's what he actually means.
Yeah.
Let the agent in front office take care of it. And that's how it should be. The guy's focused on right now, how do I stay safe from COVID, and how do I play football? That's a lot on your plate. Yeah. Why are you worrying about a contract right now?
He's also someone who's gone from who managed to escape the Jaguars and is now on the Rams. He's had some, and like, it's interesting because he also is someone who has a bit of a history of being a big ego guy,
right.
Like having a big ego, being a big head. And it seemed to me like he's trying to change how he does things, and it's so rare to me that you actually see a player who's like, hey, like he understands how the agent team dynamic is supposed to work. Like, you play the game, they deal with the money.
Yeah. And we'll get you a good deal.
Yeah.
Like, they are going to get him a good deal. They're not going to mess him up like the Jags might. They want him there long term, regardless of how it affects their salary cap, which, of course, we talked about constantly on this show.
Yeah.
But Shane, I'll finish with you with the last point that I had, which is open conversations. Now, this is something that not only with the pandemic and Anthony Lynn being completely honest to open the show, but also them talking about racial justice and bringing people in to talk about those things and what those things mean. This is a very unique season where not just on the field and you playing, but the conversation and camaraderie with your teammates with difficult topics, difficult situations. How do you think that can really bring a team together? Because we saw it not only with the Rams, but with the Chargers as well.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this is a very unique season for many, many reasons. Obviously, the thing that we've been talking about this, so far with this podcast is COVID. But there's this whole other aspect of racial justice, which since about, May 25th, when George Floyd was killed, when there's just been all this conversation about, what are we really doing as Americans? I mean, are we really where we should be? And I think it's become pretty clear that the answer is no. And, so I think seeing these athletes using their voice and their platform to, not only spread awareness and knowledge and just give their opinions and their experiences in life, in terms of racial inequality and whatnot. But they're using it, as you said, as a way to unify each other and to lift each other up. And, because, I mean, one day I think we will see a society where, stuff like that is, in terms of racial justice and stuff is served. Mm-hmm. While it seems like we're just at the beginning of this, kind of this new wave or this new fight, if you will, people are being heard. And I think it's especially relevant now that you have so many, like I said, so many players that are speaking up and are making their voices heard.
And are asking questions as well.
Right. And, in the media too it seems like kind of for the first time, they're really sort of interested in it, asking players, questions related to it. Some of those questions are a little dicey, but that's all right. Yeah. Here we are. But yeah, no, I think, obviously, like I said, COVID has been the big point of discussion in the NFL this season. But we can't forget about the other thing, which is arguably more important. I would say it is, with racial justice and the fight for social equality, because that is, I think that's the thing that's more on players' minds this year, if anything.
And then Brandon, I'll have you conclude the conversation with this. You can also add into more what Shane said, but in terms of a team to have these conversations on Zoom and all these things, how does that help unify the team together with all these conversations happening at one time? How does that benefit a team uniquely different than them just playing on the field in training camp and in practice?
Can you repeat the question?
Well, I mean, if you're looking at one of the major things, and I know that I'm sure you saw it in the episode about the uniqueness of the season where they're on Zoom and they're having these interesting conversations about all these things going on in the world. How does that help a team unify a team, build chemistry, build connections with the team, compared to just playing on the field and, doing the normal stuff of training camp?
Well, I feel like if when you have the stuff that's going on in real life and the issues that are happening, and at the end of the day, everybody's human. Mm-hmm. And football teams and any sports team in general is a diverse group of people, black and white. And at the end of the day, everyone's human, as I said. And I think by being able to have that honest conversation and saying straight up, look, this is how it is, and it's not right.
And how can we help you and
how can
support
we
you?
help you? How can we support you? How do you want us to support you? Like having those conversations about finding out what the line is for someone who is white on the team supporting someone who's black, and for different people it's different ways of support. Like some people just want you to listen. Some people want you to show up to protest. Some people want you just to be there and like not actively showcasing racist tendencies. Everybody has different ways that they say they believe things can be done, and I think
Signing petitions.
right. And I think this episode, it's interesting because again, it kind of ties into what I said at the beginning about how this episode was different, but it's interesting because it's starting to show another side. It's like for the first time with Hard Knocks, because they're not jumping right into the football side of things, it gives them time to really look at the other side of football, which is like the bond, the camaraderie between players on these teams.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, absolutely. Great perspective there from both of you. Let's move on to another interesting story from the LA region with the Rams and Sean McVay. This is something I'm going to go on a long rant about. So the Monday Night Football crew has basically been announced. It's Steve Levy, Brian Greasy, and Louis Riddick. I think they all did the Denver game last year, Denver and Oakland, now Vegas, for the late night game on the first week of the season, and they were great. And look, this is not me bashing ESPN. I want to work for ESPN. I love what they do. This is not me bashing that crew. That crew's amazing. They're going to do a great job. They're definitely going to do a lot better than Joe Tessitore and Brigham McFarland. I think we can all agree on that. But my problem is this search, and we've seen this with McVay, with Drew Brees, with Peyton Manning. I don't understand why this job in particular, or pretty much any job now in commentary, especially play-by-play and color, is so focused on stars and bringing in stars instead of building stars. Back in the day, 80s and 90s, guys like Dan Patrick and Keith Oberyn, they built their stardom, right? They got a platform from ESPN to build stardom and to build basically these personalities, these unique personalities. Stephen A. Smith was not Stephen A. Smith when he first came to ESPN, right? This is something that I don't understand. It's like, why can't we build from, let's even look at the local commentary scene. Now, obviously, we don't have preseason, but last year, I mean, the amount of local commentators, let's say 90, maybe 95% of these local commentators who do these games can easily jump up to Monday Night Football and be incredible because they're just great at what they do. How many of those guys get chances who have done it for, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years? I just don't understand why it's such a star-driven thing.
So I would counter you with this. It's not so much a star-driven thing as they want people who have experience hands-on. They're trying to get people who know what the hell they're talking about from experience.
But how many people do it locally?
Football players. They're getting football players. They're trying to get coaches. They're trying to get people who have experience. Who. And because I'm sorry, but sometimes I get so fed up with people who don't know what the fuck they're talking about, just spewing commentary.
But how many local commentators in the NFL actually do that?
There's none, Robert. None of these local commentary people okay. There's a couple people who do local commentary who have been in the NFL, right? Steve Larchin, he was in the NFL. Brock Heward, he was in the NFL, but he does Fox Sports college stuff.
Right.
Here's the thing, Robert. Like, you have to think about the fact that they're doing this based upon what they've seen from statistics and from like their things. Okay, here's my thing. I think that the NFL, like Sunday Night Football, has a great team, right?
It's the best in the business.
Best in the business. One thing you have to realize though, Monday Night Football is like crapping their pants right now. They are like terrified because they look at Sunday Night Football's ratings and they look at their ratings and they're like, we need to get people who like are gonna bring eyes to our like broadcast booth. We can't just do some Joe Schmo who is an up and coming commentator. So it's not about stars, it's not about this, it's not about that. It's about the fact is these days are different than the 90s. Like, because also one of the big differences these days is a lot of athletes are getting degrees in like communication or stuff like that because they know if they have these skills, they can end up with a job after like college. And frankly, I would much rather watch a football, an NFL game with someone like Drew Brees or
Peyton Manning
Pat McAfee or Peyton Manning in the box alongside a commentator than just having two random like
Joe Buck
up and coming stars.
Stop
Exactly.
it. I like Joe Buck a lot.
He's okay.
But here's my thing. Even with Pat McAfee, he's a perfect example of this. He, in all honesty, he kind of had to build his stardom as well. And obviously with Barstool and all that stuff. But even with that, like, let's be completely honest, he kind of had to build up to a commentary spot. I mean,
he was pretty he was pretty, like, people knew but like in his case, people knew about his antics already. So he was like,
I don't know. And then even with guys in their own building too, like, again, this is not a referendum on ESPN or what they did. It's just, I am happy with this commentary team, but like even guys like Matt Hasselbeck did the Pro Bowl with Joe Tessitore 2 years ago, and he was phenomenal.
But he also does like a bunch of college stuff already, so he's part of their team.
I guess it's more complicated than I initially seemed, but I wonder, like, it's just so shocking that they ended up with this team. And again, it's not like it's a bad team; it's an excellent team. It's definitely going to be a lot better. But I'm just wondering what were some of those pieces and those thought process through the search itself.
At least it doesn't have Jason Witten on it.
Shane, what is your perspective on our conversation here?
I mean, I'm kind of with Brannan on this one because I know that the reason that they pick them is not because they, are trying to build up a star or whatever, but it's because they, like you said, they look at the views of, Sunday Night Football and they think, okay, we need somebody like Peyton Manning, who is a, people think about Peyton Manning and they go, oh, he's so funny, I love him, like adults, whatever. So that's why they're saying, oh yeah, okay, this guy's he's a football legend. People are gonna go, oh yeah, I want to listen to that guy talk about the game. You know what I mean? No one wants to. But then you get some guy who's just some local commentator who could be good, but they're gonna go, huh? Who's that? Why? Why do I care? You know what I mean? Because Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, is not. It's definitely not as popular as it once was. So, I don't. I don't really have an issue with wanting to get a guy like Manning or Breeze or whatever, or even Sean McVay. Although I don't know why Sean McVay would accept it or why they would even approach him, because he's young and coaching. So, but that's a whole nother story. So
They would
anyway,
approach him because they're approaching everyone.
well, yeah,
Also,
true.
apparently, because Sean McVay a couple last year, the year before last, said that he could see himself getting burnt out coaching with how intense it is in the NFL, and they probably were like, "Oh, let's see if you're burnt out already."
Right.
But
Let's move on to the George Kittle contract. Now, there's an interesting story behind this contract with Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated on Tuesday released a report saying something along the lines of a 10-year, $96 million deal, which was
Mahomes, anyone?
which was completely wrong. And
Yeah.
it was said, oh, there was a trusted source. I wonder if it was someone in the organization. I would like some deep dive as to what that was, because Kittle, 5 minutes later, basically debunked it. But let's talk about the contract extension just as a whole. 5 years, $75 million for Kittle. Shane, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on the extension?
I mean, I figured he would get way more than that, because
Same.
I mean this guy is definitely their most prominent offensive player. In my opinion, a huge reason for their success offensively. So, hey, he signed it though, so he must have liked it. So, good for both of them, I guess. I mean, it's funny because I sit here and think, oh, he should have gotten 20 million or whatever, but I mean, he still gets $15 million. It's like, oh yeah, poor guy.
Yeah. I mean, for
Yeah.
me, it's like you look at how old he is. He's 26 years old. So you said it's a 6-year contract or 5 years?
It's a 5-year It's a
5-year
5-year
contract.
extension.
He'll be 31 by the time his contract runs out. That's about an average age for
For a good tight end to
for
start
a good tight
declining.
end to start declining or retiring, or I could see this probably being I mean, it's good for him because it's probably the only big contract he's going to get, because tight ends don't usually get huge contracts towards the end of their careers.
Mm-hmm. And then Travis Kelce also got a 4-year extension. It's worth a bit more than $14 million, just under $25 million guarantees. Kelce's contract. Were you surprised that this contract came a few hours later than the Kittle extension, Brandon, or no?
No, because I think the Chiefs are playing with fire here. Because it's obvious what the Chiefs are trying to do. They're like, we're gonna lock up. The Chiefs are pulling what the Seahawks did a couple back in 2015, where they locked up their 3 major guys that they wanted on their team for big money, and then they went, oh well, if we have to cut people, we cut people.
Which they already did. They cut their punter this offseason.
But I'm talking about shedding cap space, because man, I'm not buying it. The Chiefs are a good team, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're really, really pushing the envelope here, in terms of believing oh, they're gonna make it to this. For this to be a successful moves, they're gonna have to go back to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl, and then go back to the Super Bowl 3 more times.
And they're going to have to draft insanely well, which we've talked about.
Throwing money around at players.
They're spending a lot.
Yeah, and I'm like, you gave your quarterback a lot of money. You basically locked up your quarterback for his entire career.
You got Chris Jones.
Right, you have Chris Jones. You gave him a ton of money. Plus, you basically gave Travis Kelce a end of his career contract. Y'all, if I'm this GM, I'm like, this better turn out the way I want it to, because basically you can't rely on the draft to give you magically perfect picks in the first round.
Or the second.
Or the second round. Because, like, I don't know. It's a risky, like, teams don't usually do big contracts like this unless they're planning a rebuild, like with a couple players on their team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be interesting because they're not leaving themselves much space cap-wise.
Yeah. Shane, are you worried about the Chiefs cap space as Brandon is at this moment?
Yeah. Well, let me look it up. Let's see.
I know it wasn't great to begin with.
It really wasn't.
Because, I mean, if you think about it, they've got, like, so, okay. So the cap is what, 200 million?
Yeah.
I think it's like 230, but keep in mind it's also going to go down
It's going to go
during
down.
the life of these deals,
Yeah.
which is
So let's
also
just say
making it bad.
Let's just say 200. So, okay, so 45 a year to Mahomes. So that's a quarter of it.
For 7 years, right? Or 10 years?
10.
I think it's basically 10 at this
So
point. Yeah.
that's-
Well,
But this is just
13.
so this is just for his contract expires in 2032.
Yeah.
That is weird.
Yeah.
That is weird seeing that year. Anyways, so that's like a quarter of it. So let's just round that up to 50 because I mean it's big, yeah. And then 20 for Frank Clark, so that's 70. 20 more for Chris Jones, so that's 90.
Right.
14 for Kelsey, so that's math. The 104. 18 for Tyreek Hill, so that's 122.
Oh my God.
And then another 12 for Eric Fisher, so that's
130 something.
134.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do
So you have 134 out of 200 for six
players.
people.
And then you add in the fact that they have a bunch of first-round picks, and those are guaranteed big contracts.
They're solidly big. They're not too bad. But also, again, this is important to keep in mind. The cap is going, and it already has gone down. It's going to go down for like the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Which is also scary.
Which is one of the reasons why I keep this is one of the reasons why I always believe the Seahawks are going to be in the running, because they play the cap game so well. You know? They always manage to keep their cap like with enough space for them to be able to bring in a big player if they need a big player to solidify the team while still maintaining lots of room.
Yeah.
And it's, I don't know. I mean, if they can pull it off, good for them, but like,
it's going to be tough.
I don't see how you can.
Either some of their teams will you'll end up with a situation where in 3, 4, 5 years I think this is what's going to happen. In 3 or 4 years, you're going to have the Chiefs trading off players to eat cap, to other teams to eat.
Miami Dolphins.
Oh yeah, I think they're going to be shipping these players off to teams that will take the cap hit.
And the reason why I say that is the Rams literally did that with Aqib Talib last year.
Yeah, I mean it feels very Ramish, you know, in terms of like, except in this case they're not like buying up players for a one-shot run.
Yeah, they're trying to do it pretty extendedly.
Yeah.
And then another.
The bottom line is you shouldn't be playing, or you shouldn't be paying 6 out of 50 players.
Yeah.
3/4 of your cap.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. It depends how successful they are. It depends how they draft. So we can't immediately say this right out the gate, but it is tough.
Success, like, I don't know, man.
I just don't see it lasting.
Yeah, like it's the NFL. Like, it's built for parity, you know.
Yeah.
But anyways,
let's go to the last contract on this list. You might be questioning why I put this on here, but there's a reason for it. Deion Dawkins, the left tackle for the Bills, signed a 4-year, $60 million extension. My question is is offensive linemen so hard to get that guys who are average to a bit above average get $60 million? Is the offensive lineman position across this league so terrible that guys are getting amazing amounts of money for being, let's say, a bit above average? Is this
Yeah,
even normal?
especially the left tackle position because, in any offensive line, that is the most important without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
And so, except for Miami, but because they have a left-handed quarterback. But anyways,
Yeah.
So that's, yeah. I mean, that was already a very highly paid position, anyways. But I think that's just going to continue to go up, kind of like the quarterback, because teams are, I think, realizing just how important it is to have a good offensive line and how, like you said, how rare it is to come across good offensive linemen. Because most teams, I mean, if you look at the best offensive lines, like Indianapolis, for instance, they really only have like 2 or 3 guys that are like, wow, out of 5.
And they're young, by the way. All of those guys
Yeah.
are really young.
Yep.
Speaking of the idea of good to finish off contract talks, the idea of good offensive linemen made me think about some rumors I've been hearing about, or some hypotheticals of people have been talking. I was listening to 950 KJR yesterday, and they were talking about how they were talking about the fact that Clowney's still on the block, and then Mitch Levy brought up the some things he'd been hearing about. The reason they might not have been going after Clowney is that they might be trying to bring Justin Britt back after cutting him earlier. He's apparently getting healthy. He's apparently doing really well, like coming back from his injury. And we all know that God knows we need a center because, oh my God, I don't want to see another game of Joey Hunt getting bulldozed by a 2-man rush. Like, just, ugh.
It's very clear to me that the offensive line position has gone to a point where it is so difficult to find good O-linemen in the draft that it's just impossible to build a good O-line, and it's even more impossible than I originally thought.
If you have a good player, you got to keep him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would make the argument, though, that Russell's a rare player that you don't really need a good O-line with him because he can just run away.
Josh Allen, I think you might need a bit more, for sure.
I mean, I've always said that, like, for Russell, all you really need is a solid center and 2
left tackle and right tackle.
Left and right tackle, because he'll keep the pocket together. But
because guards are more for running.
Yeah.
Running game.
But I would love if they brought Justin Britt back, because I think Justin Britt is when they cut Justin Britt, my first thought was, oh no, this is Max Unger all over again.
It basically is. Yeah.
Think about it. When we had Max Unger, Russell Wilson was protected. When we had Justin Britt as doing a great job as a center, Russell Wilson was mostly protected. And
then let's continue with the Seahawks more specifically. There's an interesting story that came out this week about Russell Wilson saying the offense needs to be more aggressive this year and treat every quarter like the fourth quarter. I think we can all agree that this is an accurate assessment, but the reality is the Seahawks are just not built like that with the running game that they have.
I would argue that, I would argue this. Here's an idea I think we can all get behind. Why don't you just stop being a run-first offense and start throwing the ball more and then surprise people by running the ball? Because we've all seen it. We've all talked about it. We've all bemoaned it. Literally, the whole idea of a fourth quarter offense for the Seahawks would be you just throw the ball through the whole game instead of waiting for the fourth quarter to unleash Russell freaking Wilson on the world. When you have Russell Wilson throwing the ball through the air, he has the targets. He has the guys to throw the ball to. I mean, he has the time. He can make the plays. Do it. get it done, let it happen, and see what happens. Because I truly believe if Russell was able to throw the ball more instead of having to hand the ball off over and over and over again,
The team would be better.
We would win games by like 20 or 25 or 30.
I agree. I actually 100%
It would
agree.
be like Chiefs level offense because we have the pieces, you know?
Shane, what is your feeling on what Russell Wilson said this week?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, look, especially when you got a running back with Chris Carson, who, I mean, he's good, don't get me wrong, but, he's hurt a lot. You can't always rely on him. So I think, you got Wilson, and his connection with Lockett is just kind of insane.
And DK is going to get better too.
Now,
yeah. And I think, Lockett is like he's the go-to, improvised guy. Russell, the pocket collapses and he's dancing and running for his life. And then, there's his Hogwarts friend, Tyler Lockett, just out of nowhere.
There was a play last year, I remember, where the ball went over Russell's head and the ball was snapped. It went over his head. He wasn't even freaking out. He just ran back, picked it up, and looked like the rest of the defense on the other team had just left Lockett alone, 30 yards downfield.
That was the Vikings game 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, or something like that, because they didn't. That's right, because they didn't expect Russell.
That was Baldwin, actually.
I think it was Lockett.
No, it was
Lockett.
Lockett.
It was Baldwin.
Either way, doesn't matter.
I remember Russell goes back, gets
Same
the ball.
Concept.
I'm freaking out because the ball just flew over his. I'm like, oh no! Russell just saunters back there, gets the ball, picks it up. He's like, oh, this is nice. It's having a nice little day here. Just sees whoever it was just 30 yards downfield. He goes, oh, hello. Throws the ball, just no one around, picks it up and runs it. It's just when you let Russell do his thing, he is arguably he's the most enjoyable quarterback to watch play the game.
One of the most.
Yeah.
Honestly, to me, he's the most enjoyable because you never know what's going to happen.
He's unpredictable.
And he doesn't take himself as seriously as some of these quarterbacks do. Lamar Jackson is still taking himself a little bit too seriously, but I'm definitely on board of let Russell cook. Hashtag let Russell cook, because
I think we're all. I think everyone in the league is on board with that. Especially,
I don't know everybody in the league, because if he
say every fan in the league.
If he really started to cook, he'd just destroy cornerbacks and safeties.
No, I'm saying in terms of fans, especially fantasy players in particular.
That's why I don't understand why Brian Schottenheimer's still around, because he's so.
Is that really Is it just Schottenheimer, or is it just Pete Carroll's system?
It's not Schottenheimer, dude. Schottenheimer, trust me. Trust me. I get the sense that if Schottenheimer was allowed to do what he really wanted to do with Russell and shake up the offensive
that's how
playbook,
I feel.
They would have crazy ass bomb plays and freaking reverses and just nuts crazy stuff.
See, that's what I don't understand. That's what I don't understand. I don't like this whole hyper-conservative Brian Schottenheimer narrative. I'm sorry, it's not Schottenheimer. This is a Pete Carroll system thing. And let's finish up on the NFL. ESPN's Vaughn McClure reported that the Falcons are considering limiting Todd Gurley's workload in camp. Gurley walked with a noticeable limp during the early phases of the Falcons' acclimation period. Is this a concern for you guys? Is Gurley really going to be fully healthy once we kick off?
Here's the deal. Todd Gurley, it is a known medical fact that Todd Gurley has arthritis.
Yeah.
It's something he's going to have, arthritis in his knees, and it's something he's going to deal with for the rest of his life. And honestly, I'm shocked that he's still playing football. So,
yeah.
I don't know. It depends on how. I think Todd Gurley will be used as a I think he'll be used as a I don't think he'll be the every down back.
You think Ito Smith is going to get some run this year?
I do. I mean, I watched Ito Smith a couple games last year, and he was impressive.
He had one good game last year when he actually got the start.
Um,
Or actually, no, that wasn't when he got the start. That was when Devontae Freeman went down, and then he had a good game in the next game.
yeah.
Great. Shane, your perspective on Todd Gurley and his injuries here. Do you think he'll be an every down guy or no?
No, not at all. I mean, I just don't think it's wise for the Falcons to do that because I don't. It doesn't seem like he's going to be, their future guy. With his arthritis and just injury concerns and whatnot. So, I mean, if that's the case, why would they, try and play him all the time when they can instead try and build up their younger guys who will maybe, hopefully, take over and be starters later. But yeah, I mean, it's sad just because he is such a good player, but you got to think from the Falcons. I mean, what do we, how do we do this smart for his health and for our franchise going forward? So, yeah, I mean, again, it's unfortunate, but I think it's the wise thing to let him, not be the main guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Let's move on to college football, and Shane, I'll start with you. So the conferences playing football in the fall at this moment is the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC. Of the Power 5, the other two, the Pac-12 and the Big 10, have decided that they will try to play in the spring. What does this mean for college football and its future? Let's start with that question first.
I have no idea. I'll be honest. I really don't know. I think it's weird. I don't know why the NCAA is saying, oh yeah, you can play at different times. We're all part of the same association, but yeah, we can have half the freaking league play at an entirely different time. That's not a big deal. Have 2 different seasons. Like what? That doesn't make sense. Sorry, I'm ranting, but
no, it's fine.
No, it's just weird. I don't. College football was already in a strange place before this year, as we've talked about many times on the show. But yeah, now that this is happening, I just don't know what to think anymore. I really don't. I mean, I honestly highly doubt that they'll finish the season, because they don't seem to have the proper safety protocols in place, at least not that I've seen. And I mean, it's a big sign when none of the colleges are going back to school, yet the sports are. It's like, well, why is there an exception for this? I mean,
because it's money.
Well, yeah, obviously. So yeah, it's weird. I mean, like I said, more than anything, it just is strange that they are allowed to play essentially 2 different seasons, which just goes to show that conferences have way too much power in the NCAA, and that the NCAA actually needs to take initiative and say, okay, no, here's how it's going to be. Whatever, I mean, imagine like in the NFL, if the NFC West was like, yeah, we're not going to play, the whole season would be canceled. I mean, you can't. No, seriously. Like, so the fact that I don't know.
So
I'm being gratuitous at this point, but
here's the thing: the NCAA today, or what was it? Late yesterday or today. So last week they canceled D1 and D2 and D3. This week they canceled all fall sports, every single one other than football. They canceled everything else but football. What? And then basketball, because basketball's still up in the air. Brandon, what's your thoughts on college football? And also, do you think spring college football will work?
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I got to go actually.
All right, you can add out.
I just realized the time.
You can add out, Shane. Have a great rest of your day.
Listening.
Yep.
Yeah.
me and Brandon will finish up. We only have a couple topics left. But your thoughts on college football?
You know, I don't think it'll. A lot of people seem to have this like death gong sort of like, oh no, it's gonna kill off college football. Look, college football is unkillable. Like, here's the fact: any school that's part of the NCAA will get some sort of stupid funding from the government to keep them open. Mm-hmm. The only reason why SEC schools are still playing football this season is because if they don't, they would literally bankrupt towns.
That is also true. That's another piece of this as well, is that some of the towns, they're for these small towns like Tuscaloosa, for example, like all they care about is the game. Like that's where they make their most money.
Like Tuscaloosa, you have Texas A&M, their town,
College Station, Texas.
College Station, yeah. But it's kind of weird to me because you look at where the games are being played and they're in the hotspot areas. Like,
yeah,
it's worrisome a little bit. And honestly, when it comes to summer, when it comes to spring games, I believe they'll get played because look, I have no idea what the world will be like in the spring, but I believe, because I have to believe that
hope.
I have to believe for my sanity that things will be better to where we can actually do things.
Yeah.
But I have no idea.
Spring ball will not work. Fall ball will not work. This is dumb. The season needs to be canceled. Literally, I do not care about college football in 2020. I don't care.
So you think that they should just hold off till fall 2021?
Yeah. I think there's if the conferences are going to be like this, as Shane pointed out, if in his right, like what he said in his rant, I echoed the same thing. It's like, you cannot be serious if this is the way you're structuring it. So again, what's the point of playing any sport, especially college football, if we have zero indication what the college football playoff is going to look like?
Yeah,
they're not competing for like. These
the
players
NCAA has said there's going to be no championships.
So then, what are we playing for?
Nothing.
We're playing for an SEC title? Do we care about that?
People in SEC country do.
But if there's no national championship, again, you say no championships, but that means just in general, like track or all those kind of things. They haven't specifically talked about the college football playoff just yet. If we don't have a college football playoff in January or February or March, there's no point. Who cares?
They're just playing to play at that point.
Yeah, they're just playing to play at that point. And then I get it for the scouts. Like the scouts have already said in the NFL, like this draft process is going to suck because we're going to have tape from 2 years ago. We might not even have tape for some of these guys. It's going to suck. But I don't care.
It's going to be random-ass drafts at that point.
It's going to be so random. And you know what? It's fine because you know what's going to be sick about this draft? There's going to be guys in the 5th round that probably should have been drafted in the top 10. Maybe. There's
the Seahawks are going to have a friggin' field day. Like, they're going to be like, oh, hello, you're in the 5th round? Yes, we would love to take you in the 5th round.
It's like, you know what? The draft process, even though it's going to be bizarrely weird in so many different ways and it's going to be crazy, it's going to make for a more interesting draft. You know what? I'm all for it after whatever that virtual draft was that we did a huge contact for in April. I'm down for that again. I don't care. It might be a harder draft to analyze, but I don't care. It's still going to be fun.
That draft was pretty crazy on its own.
Yeah. Like, and imagine this draft's going to be twice as crazy.
I feel like we will forever, whenever we like come back to, whenever we have draft coverage on this podcast in the future, we're gonna have like an audio package of me just freaking out, just going, "What is with all the tight ends?" It will be called the draft of the tight ends for me from now on.
Yeah.
Just crazy.
Classic clip. A couple of housekeeping notes for the next couple of weeks. We might have a fantasy league for fantasy football yet. I still haven't figured out all those details. I probably will be in multiple leagues this year. We might have that sometime next week. I hope to have something ironed out for that. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure at this moment. One thing that I am 100% sure is we will have an NBA bracket challenge. So expect that either Saturday, Sunday, or early Monday. And we hope to have a lot of you join us, whether you're Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or wherever you're watching this podcast. We'll hope to leave a link somewhere down there for you to check out, or we'll post that up. So that's for sure. Fantasy football, not so sure at this moment how that's going to work. But with the bracket, I'm 100% sure that we're going to get that done for all of you. So that should be exciting. Brandon, thanks for a great show as always, and Shane as well. And we will see you all back next week.
Indeed.
All right. Have a great weekend, everybody. Also, we forgot to talk about UFC 242 really quick. What are your thoughts on Miocic and Cormier?
I would love to see Cormier take the title, take the belt, and retire with the belt.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I feel like Miocic might retain just because he's like, I don't know.
Yeah. I look at
I
this
really
as,
don't know. I feel like it's a very even fight.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's going to be a ridiculously awesome fight. Cormier is looking at this as the swan song, and his career trajectory, if he wins this fight, John Jones, who cares at this point?
Yeah.
Like, if he wins this fight, obviously this fight's for MMA GOAT status. Well, not MMA GOAT status, MMA heavyweight GOAT status. That's very clear. If Cormier wins this, stop talking about John Jones Cormier. I know it will never go away, but if he wins this, stop talking about that, and let's just focus on the great career Cormier has had. And regardless if he wins or loses, can we please focus on the incredible career that he's had at the end of the night, because he is a Hall of Famer, no doubt. A couple other pieces for this card. Sean O'Malley, everyone's really excited to see him. We have he's fighting Mario Rivera. And then we have a few other great fights here as well, but that one in particular is going to be cool. And then Junior Dos Santos versus Rosenstrike should be fun as well. So those are a couple fights to watch, and that is it for today. We'll see you all next week. See you, Brandon. Have a great weekend, man.
Yep.